My name is Lian Li. As Sam said, I'm a cloud native engineer is what we call ourselves. I'm also an engineering manager at Container Solutions, and I don't think there's more to say to that. I think the main thing is that the cloud native engineers at Container Solutions are consultants. So a lot of what I'm going to say is, or I'm going to tell you about, is based on like experience that I had with clients that I worked for, and I'm just, sharing them with you in like trying to make it fun because it's late. So just a little bit about me. I'm one of the organizers at ServerlessDays Amsterdam also. So if you're into serverless as opposed to Kubernetes, we can be friends. We don't have, doesn't have to be like this, right? We can be friends. There's Knative. If you're interested in that, talk to me. We just started organizing the conference for this year. So we had a great offline conference in 2019, and we had a virtual conference last year. So this year's going to be another one. We also have meetups once a month, every first Wednesday of the month. So if you want to speak there or you're just interested, talk to me. I'll be happy to talk to you about a serverless as well. But today, title of my talk today is Kubernetes Won't Save You. Before you say anything, I know what you're going to say. Serverless won't save you either. I'm not going to try to sell you serverless. It's not about technology. So what I want to talk about today is about culture, because that is, I think, a very, very important topic that you need to think about, talk about when adopting cloud native, moving into the cloud. It's about the culture of like problem solving, adapting to change, building trust, resilience in your entire organization. So as I said before, this is all based on like my personal experiences that might differ from yours. I've been working in tech for, I don't know, like 10, 11 years. Started as a software engineer, mainly in the web, did a lot of front end, then a lot of back end. Well, I started with back end, PHP actually, moved to the front end, then did some like full stack thing, DevOps, and now I'm here. So yeah, first, I'm going to talk a bit of Kubernetes. I'm going to talk about the state of Kubernetes. So I guess like everyone kind of knows what it is. In case you don't, Kubernetes basically is a container orchestration platform, and it has become quite popular in the last couple of years. It just makes infrastructure tasks cheaper, faster. But again, this is not specifically about Kubernetes, but about the implications of adopting something like Kubernetes. So this is an image that's taken from a white paper that our CTO Ian Crosby wrote about 2 years ago, I think. This is a reference to something from Geoffrey A. Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm. So this is about the technology adoption lifecycle. Basically, there's this thing called the chasm, which every technology has to pass to be adopted into the mainstream market. So in the beginning, you only have like the people who are just like early adopters. And then once they cross this magical chasm, they'll be adopted into the mainstream market. They make money. And this is the graphic that was in the white paper then. And then, so this was 2 years ago. And I would argue that, in fact, we have now crossed the chasm. Kubernetes has become mainstream. And the implications of that are both can be good and can be bad. So this is a headline. These are actually a couple of headlines taken from the last 3 years. I don't know if you remember those. Some of those headlines have caused a little bit of outrage, interest, or like just shit posts in the DevOps community. I encourage you to Google all of these stories later. They're also in the slides, which I'm going to share, because the point I'm making is that all these headlines point to the fact that, as you say here, Kubernetes has become boring. It's the de facto industry standard for some, like for some things. I'm not going to say it's the industry standard for every company, but definitely, if you want to do Docker, if you want to go to the cloud, you're probably going to reach for Kubernetes. But that's not only like a bad thing. It also points to the fact that people are slowly waking up from this dream that, Kubernetes will come and magically solve all their problems. You know, it's just a technology. You have to actually put elbow grease in it, think about your organization, your product, and then see how you can adopt Kubernetes in a way that it will benefit your business. So I'm going to also talk a little bit about that like during this talk. So yeah, to me, there's two aspects to what I'm calling like misunderstanding the problem. You know, you're holding it wrong, you're taking Kubernetes, doesn't really work for you. It's about attitude, really. There's the attitude about technology, the attitude towards products and tools, and then there's the attitude towards people and the, you know, the concept of work. What does it mean to be an engineer? So these are the two kinds of attitudes that I'm going to speak about. Yeah, first question, what is cloud native? I mean, does anyone have a good definition of what cloud native is? If you do, please unmute yourself and let us know. Oh, okay. It's good that no one said anything, because my point would have been that, you know, it's very fuzzy. It's very difficult to really say like, this is what cloud native is. The CNCF defines cloud native in this way. So cloud native technologies empower organizations to build, run scalable applications in modern dynamic environments, such as public, private, and hybrid clouds. Container, service meshes, microservice, immutable infrastructure, and declarative APIs exemplify this approach. So first of all, this definition is very technical. This is about computing, but also it doesn't really explain what it is. It just explains a little bit like what cloud native tech does, and then gives a bunch of examples. But it doesn't really say this is what it is. And I think that's probably smart, because it's kind of like one of those fluid tech words that is also used a lot in sales, that is just subject to change, because it means whatever we want it to mean. So there's also other aspects, I think, to cloud native. So there's also something like a shift in project management or business strategy that you might need to consider. So we have this thing called the Cloud Native Maturity Matrix. This is a tool that we use when we go to a customer and we want to try to assess the current state of their technology stack. And then we use that to show them like, okay, where do you maybe want to go? And like, how far are you from that? Maybe which steps do you need to go through? We can debate whether the points as they are presented in this matrix are exactly like what you think they should be. But I think the important takeaway from this is that there's more levels to cloud native than just, you know, the technology or just Kubernetes. There's stuff like the general architecture. Are you using microservices? Are you just having a monolith? Like, how do you deliver your software? Do you using like full CI/CD, like GitOps, or are you just like, do you just have a, I mean, you can even do GitOps, but still not have like fully automated CI/CD. So sometimes like the technology that you use does not mean that you're actually leveraging the full, you know, potential that you would have if you were doing like full cloud native. So for example, if you don't have microservices, if you just have one monolith, then having full CI/CD will only get you that far. It will not give you, you know, all the goodness that is Kubernetes. So yeah, we use this often when we meet with a client, and then we end up with something like this, maybe, you know, where we say like, okay, I think you're here, you're there. And then usually cloud native is where we want to go. So like, I already have a problem with the fact that it says serverless is next in provisioning. Doesn't really make any sense to me. I don't think it's a scale where it's Kubernetes now and serverless tomorrow. I think there's a, you know, there's a use case for every tool probably, or there's different use cases for different tools. So I don't think it's that kind of scale. But again, I think this is just mainly to start a conversation about, you know, what dimensions do we see and where do we want to go? Maybe some things we don't care about, that's also fine. If you're interested in this, you can go to our website, containersolutions.com/maturity matrix assessment. It's free. And you can like click through it and just see like for yourself maybe like about your own organization. Where do you see it and where would it score there? Just check it out. So this is another aspect that I want to talk about, which is, I mean, there's always an XKCD for everything, right? So this one is entitled automation. So we have this graph that basically states, and this is something I think we all thought about one time or another, that, you know, I have this very tedious manual task and it just takes so much time and it's boring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write some code to automate this task. And then it's going to be a bit more work in the beginning, but at some point, you know, automation will like take over, and then I don't have to spend time anymore. And then I'm going to have all this free time. When in fact, what's usually happening, and it happens to me as well, is that you start writing the code and then you get into this whole like rabbit hole of like optimizing this code, debugging it, and then redesigning it and writing tests and whatever. And then suddenly you are working on this code so much that you don't even have time for the original task anymore. Like it's just become this Frankenstein monster. I think we all probably know people who've been subject to this, which I call the little brother of the sunken cost fallacy. Like, okay, I've already put this time in there, so I need to continue until I actually get something out of it. So I have actually a funny example, I think, of that by one of our customers. That was actually the first project that I worked on. So I don't know if I told any of my colleagues who are in this call, but this is a funny story, so pay attention. So we had this customer who they bought a company that had developed this piece of technology. It was a camera chip. So it was a camera with a chip on it that would do like object and facial detection. And so it was doing AI on that chip, but they also wanted like a platform. So we were building a platform that would take that data and then like do some more processing on it, like mood detection on the facial recognition. And it should be highly scalable. So we, of course, went with Kubernetes. We built this platform with microservices. We had like a cool like data pipeline. So it was a really interesting project just from like the technology angle. It had AI, it had IoT. It literally just lacked Bitcoin or blockchain. That was the only thing missing in there. It was fun. And then the customer pushed us to deliver for a demo that they had with investors and press. So then the use case suddenly changed. Suddenly they didn't want this to be highly scalable. They wanted to only run on one single physical server. And we were like, yeah, sure, you can run a single node Kubernetes cluster. That doesn't matter, right? That's the nice thing about Kubernetes. But then also this server couldn't be connected to the internet ever. We couldn't ever connect it to the internet. So what we had to do was they bought a physical server, they shipped it to us by UPS. We had our Helm charts and everything, basically not just the Helm charts, like everything, the entire application on a USB drive that we then used to install the shit on it. And then we shipped the server back to them. And then it went even worse because then their machine learning engineers obviously did not know any Kubernetes. So then we had to troubleshoot, but we couldn't like log on to the server. Obviously, it was not connected to the internet. So their engineers had to take pictures on their phones, send it to us so we could debug it. And yeah, that was great. That was a huge company, by the way. They make billions of money. That's probably why they could afford to just do that. But I mean, there's two ways to look at this. Either we worked on completely different projects, like on entirely different projects in mind, entirely different goals in mind, or we did the most physical handover of a cloud application that I've ever seen. But you know what? Like now I have a funny story to tell at conferences. So by the way, XKCD, you probably know that it always has like this hover text when you hover over the mouse. So this text reads, automating comes from the roots auto, meaning self, and mating, meaning screwing yourself. Meaning screwing, so it's screwing yourself. So yeah, that was, I mean, it was funny, but it was also really not funny. Anyway, I think what I'm getting at is that there's this principle, this design principle, which form follows function. And that all it means is that the shape of a building or object should primarily relate to its intended function or purpose. So what actually, to put it in a different way, it just means you should first think about what something should do and then think about how it should look like. It's a very simple principle actually, but when you transfer this to a business, you might think that, this is not something that a lot of businesses actually do. We have so many companies, startups that use tech like AI or blockchain or Kubernetes just because everyone is doing it with no added value to the actual product or business, because they just don't think about it. I mean, the way that I see it is tech is a byproduct of problem solving. It's not an end to itself. Like, we are trying to solve a problem for our customers, and tech is the way by which we do that. But it's not the end to itself. So what you need to ask yourself is like, is this tech that I'm using really solving the core problem and contributing to my core business? Or has it maybe begun to have a life of itself? Is it this Frankenstein monster that just like eating up your resources? You have to like grow your infrastructure team when really it doesn't really, you're just running an online shop. You don't need a Kubernetes cluster. Think about that. So yeah, one way to do that is the Golden Circle by Simon Sinek. I apologize, by the way. I give this talk a lot to like business types, so it might not be super interesting for you now expecting this to be about Kubernetes, but I'm still going to tell you about this because I think everyone can be interested in business. So the Golden Circle is something that Simon Sinek is like a, I don't know, business type speaker. He's actually has a couple of very good opinions that you should check out. But one of the Golden Circle is where he looks at basically things about your organization to find out like, what is it actually that you're selling to people? So there's this different levels of like the why, the how, and the what. And if you don't know that yet, but you have a business already, you could think about it in like the opposite direction. So first you would think about what is the product that I'm selling? What are the services that I'm offering? What is the thing that I'm actually doing? Like the tangible thing. And then you can ask yourself, how am I doing this? What are my strengths, my values, my guiding principles? As an example, if you sell cameras and this is like super special to you, then maybe how you do that is by providing like very good customer service. Maybe you have a very personal business. You talk to your customers. You actually know them. You care about like their dogs or whatever. This is how you do it. And then finally, you can ask yourself, why? What is the purpose, the cause, or the belief that you have that motivates you to do the things that you do and how you're doing them? So same example, maybe it's because you believe that everyone should have the possibility to take beautiful pictures, to have a great Instagram profile. This is your why. And it sounds very esoteric. I understand that I'm an engineer. Like I didn't really believe in this kind of stuff. But if you look at a company like Apple, people don't really, I mean, maybe we as engineers do, but a lot of people don't really buy Apple products because of the what, because I get a phone, but because of the why, because Apple sells them this idea of being like unique and fashionable and trendy. And that is the core of their business, to sell them this identity. So it's very actually useful to understand the why, the how, and the what of your business. Finally, to end this chapter, I want to just like share this quote by Tatiana Mack, who's an engineer mainly focused on like inclusion and accessibility. And she once said in one of her talks, a solution is only as good as your framing of the problem. And I mean, I've been doing some machine learning on the side for a while, and it's so accurate. Like, you will never get a good solution if you don't understand your problem. And this is, I think, what I'm seeing companies struggling with a lot. They're just adopting technology, but they don't understand their problem. And the adoption of the technology, not the technology itself, but the transformation, exaggerates the problem so much that it's just not feasible. And then they tend to blame the technology for it. All right, just taking a quick drink break. So the second part, the cloud native mindset. This is the attitude towards people and towards culture and towards what it means to work as an engineer in this cloud native world. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to consider that have been something that existed already in the past, but are becoming more important now. So there's this thing that's called continuous learning, or Kaizen. If you worked in an agile software engineering company, you might have heard about it. Kaizen is this like Japanese practice. And I mean, Kubernetes was released like 5 years ago, like June 2014, I think. And we are all very new to this. I know that some recruiters would like us to have like 10 years of Kubernetes experience, but we're all learning. We just don't really know what the best practices are. We just have to figure it out, and we have to learn from others. Most, if not all, modern paradigms in the tech industry kind of show the same trend, which is that we are moving away from those stagnant processes that are basically like trains, where you just like, you get in, you just go straight ahead. And if you want to move anywhere, it has to be in place. It has to already have been planned to turn left. Otherwise you can't do it. And now we're like moving away from that with all this agile product management, where we're like trying to be fast and flexible. So instead of planning our releases out for like months or years in advance, you know, we're just trying to follow these agile principles, which are failing fast and often. So we use this failing fast and often principle. We build this into this process of failing fast and often, very often, where you have this perpetual feedback loop, where you have the ceremonies to optimize the failing process and the feedback generation. So that would usually be like a sprint, and then you have a retrospective at the end of the sprint, and then you have a sprint planning. And like, this is just like a failing loop pretty much. Yeah, and to do that, you know, to be able to live in a cycle of continuous failure and not burning out, you need to create this culture that encourages failing and learning from it. So you need the psychological safety. You need abilities that require stuff like taking responsibilities, you know, self-efficacy, which means that you believe that you can do things even if you can't at this point, but you will learn, and also being able to handle stress. Psychological safety is really important because everything moves so fast and we have so much more responsibility now as engineers. So just to illustrate my point is, if you look at this grid, you can see that, you know, on the x-axis, you have the accountability for meeting goals, where if you have low accountability and, you know, lower psychological safety, why would I even care? It's not my fault anyway if it fails, so don't really care. Which is not super great, because you want people to take responsibility. You want people to like, you know, like be proud of their work and be rewarded if it's great, but also like, you know, when it doesn't work out, to, you know, be responsible for it and learn from it and take the consequences. But if you like have high accountability, but like low psychological safety, people will be super anxious because they never know when they're going to get fired, or when they're going to have that, like, you know, like when your manager comes to you and like, oh, we need to talk, or do you have 5 minutes to talk? Like that thing, you don't want that to spiral out of control. So also the part where you have low accountability, but like high psychological safety, where it's just comfortable for you. You know what to do. You know that's not gonna hurt your reputation if you do something wrong. But like no one will bother you. Well, that's great, but then you're not going to learn. You're just going to be comfortable forever, and you're not going to grow. And in this fast-moving cloud native space, you're just going to, you know, be like way behind at some point because it just moves so fast. So yeah, if you want to read more about the psychological safety and why it's important to get into that learning zone, you can check out the blog post. Again, it's linked in the slides that I'm going to share. And yeah, read more about it. Finally, I think this is my last one, collaboration. I mean, if you think about it, everything is distributed now. Microservices are distributed. Even we are distributed now. Everything's about communication. You know this from your software, probably. As soon as you split things up into microservices, the crucial point of failures become the connections, the communication between those microservices. So you have to put a lot more effort into like monitoring and building and thinking about the communication. it's the same with people, like as soon as you put people into different rooms, distribute them, you need to put much more effort and intent into how they talk to each other and how they work with each other, which means you need to put a lot of effort into streamlining this kind of collaboration. Can't tell you how to do that. It's different for every organization. Maybe you want to go on Slack. Maybe you just want to have calls. I don't know. It's just that the point is just that it's not about putting more work on the people, but trying to find out how do people work with each other and how do they talk to each other. And there's a very good book by, I don't remember, Matt Skelton is one of the co-authors, I think. It's called Team Topologies. And it's mainly about how teams and organizations work together, work more effectively together. I can highly recommend it. And I think it's based on Conway's law that says that if you have a team, a specific team setup, it will be reflected in the software that they built. So you will never have software that works in a way that's different from how the team communicates. I probably didn't put it very well, but like check out the book or Conway's Law. So yeah, I talked a lot about culture and tech and all of that, but like I didn't talk about innovation, creativity, and speed, which are things that is sold to people, when they're told like, oh, use Kubernetes, then you'll have more time for innovation. It doesn't just come like that. You need a lot of different things to make sure that happens. So this, I think this quote by Ben Chestnut is very indicative of that, because he says that fearlessness begets happiness, which begets creativity, which begets innovation, which begets profits. So you start out in a space of psychological safety and fearlessness, and then those other things will come. You can't force them. They will come. So yeah, again, most of the times when we or I saw cloud native transformations failing, I saw that it was really like a cultural problem also, or it's just a misunderstanding of what we're actually trying to solve here. So I had a client that wanted us to build a CI/CD platform for them. And we built this with full CI/CD in mind. It was GitOps actually. I think we used two Jenkinses, one for delivery, one for the deployment. We were thinking like, okay, what are the best practices? Trunk-based, trunk-based deployments, fully automated all the way to productions. We even wrote operators to provision the components. I mean, again, from a technological point, it was really great. It's a lot of fun, bleeding edge technology. But then we worked on this for 2 years. And after 1 year, we looked at how it was used. And actually, people built all kinds of workarounds that let them use like Git flow so they could go back to the multi-month releases that they had before, that didn't want to have, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, because they didn't want to take ownership of the components. It was just too risky. They just didn't want to get fired. People were just used to, build something, throw it over the wall, and then let operations deal with it. And now they were forced to take ownership and to like baby their code all the way to production. And it was just too risky for them. So collaboration was mainly expressed through like very rigid processes, clear hierarchy, and that's how they always worked, and that's how their culture functioned. And only 2 years into the project did the company understand that they had to change the culture to actually do anything that would resemble CI/CD and microservices and all of that. But in my opinion, they should have started way earlier with changing the culture first. So this is a quote that is actually from, I think, kind of from the book Team Topologies. Don't do a transformation because you want to use Kubernetes. Use Kubernetes because you're doing a transformation, right? You want to change something. First, figure out what it is you want to change. What is it in your business that doesn't work? And then think about, is Kubernetes actually the thing that you need? Or maybe it's not Kubernetes. Maybe it's serverless. Maybe it's, maybe it is a monolith that you deploy with an FTP, like SFTP. Maybe if it's just maybe you don't need like a fully scalable Kubernetes cluster. I don't know. All I'm saying is that Kubernetes alone won't save you, but with the right mindset, Kubernetes might be just what you need to save yourself. And with that, just the last kind of salesy thing that I want to just let you know, because if you are thinking about moving to the cloud and you don't know if you want to or if it's the right thing for you, this is something that we offer at the company. So there's this book, Cloud Native Transformation, and it's full of patterns. So patterns, how you can solve your problems when moving them to the cloud. It would look like this. It's these like cards. You have like, like microservice architecture. What does it mean? And then think about how it could benefit your organization, maybe. You don't have to buy the book, I think. You can just go to cnpatterns.org and you will get the patterns there for free. I'm allowed to say that because our CEO says also all the time. Finally, I think we're hiring again. We're hiring engineers, consultants, pretty much everything. If you're also fully remote. So if you are interested, you can talk to me or David or probably almost everyone here. There's also a Twitter account, LinkedIn, probably website, the drill. Yeah, thank you very much for listening to me rant drunkenly for some time. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Lian. It's a really good talk. Really enjoyed it. So yeah, let's see.
Thanks.
We already have a few questions. David has been busy in the chat, so we'll let him take over.
Yes, thanks.
Awesome.
I allowed myself to reply to one of the questions actually, but we still would love to hear your opinion on one question we got, which is pretty cool. Mans is asking if is there such thing as failing too much? Because you were saying about failing fast, right? Yeah.
I guess it depends on what you say failing is. So the idea is that, in retrospectives, you think about what didn't go wrong in your process and then you try to optimize it, which is not really a failure, is it? You just it's a learning experience. We just reframe kind of like a failure into learning experience. So if you're able to frame something in a way that, because you're going to fail anyway, like the bad thing that has happened has already happened. And there's nothing you can do about it. The best thing you can do is learn from it. No one's going to intentionally fail, but there's no point in punishing yourself or punishing your colleagues for something that you were trying the best to do. Everyone's always you have to believe that everyone's always trying their best, and failing is or should not be considered as a bad thing because it gives you the chance to be better. So I would say no, probably there's no such thing as failing too much, as long as you learn from it.
Great. Okay. John is asking, do you have any observations on approaches to changing the culture / shifting mindsets that has proven effective?
That's a very good question. The different thing about culture, I feel, is that culture has to come from the bottom. It's not that this is what the customer tried that I mentioned at the end. They ran this campaign. I mean, they have 5,000 employees or something, and they just ran this campaign where they changed your desktop background to inspirational, motivational quotes and stuff. That doesn't really work. People are what's going on? I don't want this. What I think you need are people who are called multipliers. You have that when you go to conferences. When you have people who go to conferences and then they bring knowledge back to their teams, they multiply ideas. Someone goes, sees a Kubernetes talk, they come back, they implant that idea into other people. They're called multipliers. And what I think, what I've seen work the best, it's not perfect, but it's the best way, is find those multipliers and agree with them, because these are people who have influence. People listen to them. They're usually not management. They're usually people who are trustworthy, but not in a management role or position. And if you have a big enough group of allies to transport a specific message, then I found that was the most effective. And then the next difficult or important step would then be convince management that this is a culture that's important and it needs to be adopted more widely.
Great. Yeah, I would add something from myself as well, John, because very concrete example, maybe that will help you. So one of my clients they had a problem that Prometheus, right? So we're talking about monitoring on Kubernetes. The Prometheus started eating more and more RAM over time, right? When we started like 3 months ago, it was using around 11 gigabytes of RAM on one specific cluster, and we end up in the situation that it was killed by Kubernetes because it was tried to use more than 30 gigabytes of RAM, which was more than our nodes had. And for months and months, actually not months and months, but more like weeks and weeks, I was talking to them that, hey guys, we need to upgrade the Prometheus because it's like a super old version. They probably improved performance over time, but they were keep pushing back on me because like we have already 1 terabyte of data in that Prometheus. We don't want to upgrade it because then we are scared about the data and maybe something break about the upgrade. And I was keep pushing on them that, hey, we can make a backup of the data, we can make sure that it's safe and so on, but they were still pushing back. So we end up in the situation that they told me, no, we don't want to upgrade. Please just create new node pool in Kubernetes with high memory nodes, and we'll just move the Prometheus there. So I was like, okay, yeah, if that's what you want, then sure, we can do it. And I spent around a week, I think, doing that, right? Because just adding the node pool to Kubernetes takes like 1 hour, of course, but add this to Terraform, test it first on dev cluster, that all adds up to a week of work, right? And after that week of work, when I had all the code ready, and I was ready basically to move that Prometheus to the new node pool, then I was like, okay, but I need to restart Prometheus anyway because it needs to be rescheduled to that new node. So I actually did it a bit under the hood. I upgraded the Prometheus, few versions up, when I knew that it's going to be fine, because I didn't upgrade it all the way to the latest version because there was like some changes, but I upgraded few versions which I knew will be fine. And that Prometheus, after upgrade on the new node pools, started eating actually less RAM than before. So we end up consuming about 9 gigabytes of RAM instead of 30, just because I upgraded in the meantime. And that was one of the situations that made my client actually realize that, actually you were right. So I think that the moral here is that sometimes you need to hand people proof on a plate, like show them exactly what are the benefits or what are you trying to convince them. So that's from myself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I also want to give a book recommendation. If you're into reading books, there's also an audiobook. It's called Tribal Leadership. And it's basically the story of that is kind of like, how do you talk to each other? How do you lead specific groups? And there's one thing that really stuck with me is don't just have one-on-one conversations. Don't have like dual conversations, but like always try to get 3 people in a conversation. Always try to build new connections. And I think one of the things with your client at that time was that the right people were not talking to each other. Like you had this one team that needed something from the other team, and the other team would have been happy to provide this for the team if they had known that there was this need. So whenever you try and like do something about the culture in your company, always think about how can the most amount of people benefit from this conversation? Can I bring maybe 1 more person or 2 more persons in here so they can build a relationship and they can continue to work together, to collaborate, and then, do great things without you. So I hope that helps. I hope that answered your question. Okay, cool. Thanks very much for having me. I hope this was not, I know that people were I know that the meetup said it was Kubernetes related, and I hope it was still interesting.